Okay, great. Thank you so much. Again, my name's Jenny Nelson. I'm with the E-Verify division at the Department of Homeland Security. And we're going to get into the E-Verify requirements for federal contractors today. Most federal contracts contain that FAR E-Verify clause, so it's important if you're applying for contracts or if you have a federal contract to know how to abide by those E-Verify requirements within the contract. They're a little bit different than they are for general E-Verify employers. So we're going to go through the timeframes that you need to be aware of, as well as dollar thresholds that are important to be mindful of too with those federal contracts. At the end of our presentation, then, we are going to talk a little bit about the E-Verify system itself, the creation of an E-Verify case, and what to do with the results that you receive when you're creating those cases in E-Verify. Really, that E-Verify system is very simple. It's easy to use. It's free. There's no charge to enroll or create cases in the system. And for all employers, it is the best way available to ensure that you have a legal workforce. So we're going to talk very briefly about that Form I-9. However, if you hear me talking about the I-9 and you are lost or confused, or you need a little more information about that, we aren't really going to get into that in detail today, but certainly reach out to me following the webinar. I'd be more than happy to provide additional training on the Form I-9 that is required by all employers, regardless of size or industry. If you're hiring people, you need to have that Form I-9 on file. So it's important to know how to do it correctly. It's a two-page form. It can look pretty simple, but there are some nitty-gritty details to it, like most federal forms, that you really want to make sure that you're doing correctly. So just kind of want to put that out there. I will give you my email address at the end of the presentation, so you can reach out to me if you have any questions about what we talk about today or that Form I-9 additionally. So let's hop in here with our first section about kind of the big picture of E-Verify and how it works, and then also what federal contracts are affected by that FAR E-Verify clause. So like I said, E-Verify is free, no charge to use it, and it electronically allows you to verify that your newly hired employees are legally authorized to work in the United States. And if you have one of those qualifying federal contracts, like we're talking about today, you are also able to create cases for existing employees. And you have some options within that, and we're going to talk about those. But you are kind of unique in that you're the only type of employers who are allowed to create cases for existing employees. How you do that and which existing employees is really up to you. So, those are some decisions that you need to make as a federal contractor when you're enrolling in E-Verify. It is actually operated by the Department of Homeland Security, where I work, and we do so in partnership with the Social Security Administration. So basically, E-Verify kind of takes that information that you've collected on the Form I-9 and queries millions of government records to make sure this person is in fact legally authorized to work in the United States. The FAR E-Verify clause itself is about 1,100 words in length, so it's not very long, and it should be included in all federal contracts that qualify for that clause. In addition to federal contractors, there are some states that have required the use of E-Verify as well. It's not federally mandated at this time. However, as you can see on our slide here, those states that are highlighted in blue are the ones that require the use of E-Verify in one form or another. You can see that Nebraska is one of those. And the legislation really varies across the country. It can be for all employers or most employers, kind of depending on the number of employees that employer has. It can also be for public employers, state employers, public entities, or public contractors. So Nebraska is actually one of the states that has that requirement for state contractors as well. If you're receiving state contract funds, you are required to use the E-Verify program too. So you want to be mindful of that, especially since we're in Nebraska here. You want to make sure you are following those local requirements if you don't yet have a federal contract. Couple things here that E-Verify is not. There are some misconceptions out there about what E-Verify can be used for and cannot be used for. So we like to clear those up right up front here. It's not a system that provides immigration status. It's not going to tell you someone's immigration status. It is going to tell you if someone is legally authorized to work in the United States. That's the purpose of E-Verify. It also cannot be used for pre screening employment applicants. So, by this, we just mean that you must have already offered that job and the employee accepted the job before you ever create a case for them in E-Verify. And then finally, it's not a safe harbor from worksite enforcement. And of course, that one I feel like is kind of obvious, probably self explanatory. But really, what it means is that just because you've signed up to use E-Verify does not mean that you would not have the chance of being inspected or audited again in the future. But what it is doing for you is showing good faith on your part. It shows that you're doing everything you can to ensure you have a legal workforce at your company, even if you're not required to use the system. So we really encourage all employers to enroll in E-Verify, even though they may not be required to do so, because it is showing good faith. It's the best means you have available to ensure that you have a legal workforce at your company. And here's just a little schematic of how that all kind of melds together. We talked about the Form I-9. This is 2 pages in length. The first page is completed by your employee. Second page is where you record the documents that they provided to prove their identity and their employment authorization. And then that information is keyed into the E-Verify system, which queries millions of government records at the Social Security Administration, the Department of Homeland Security, sometimes the Department of State, and as well as Department of Motor Vehicles. So we are querying a lot of records, and typically within 3 to 5 seconds, we will come back with an initial case result. So the one that's most common is the employment authorized result shown down there in the lower left. It is received more than 98% of the time. So it's a very fast and simple result that you might see in the system. The other results that you might see are a tentative non-confirmation or a verification in process. And like I said at the beginning, we are going to get into these in a little more detail towards the end of our presentation and kind of know what to do with those case results when you get them. Um, so I'm not going to get into a lot of detail with those here because we're going to come back to those. Right now, I really want to just focus on that FAR E-Verify clause. Like I said, it's 1,100 words in length, and basically what it says is that as of September 8th of 2009, this FAR final rule requires that as a condition of their contract that federal contractors as well as their subcontractors use E-Verify to verify the employee's eligibility to work legally in the United States. So I've given you a live link on this slide to the clause itself. One important note that I will say here is that it is your federal contracting official that will determine if the clause needs to be in your contract. I'm going to give you some resources a little bit later for E-Verify. And of course, you can always contact us if you have questions about the E-Verify program or what we talked about today. However, E-Verify is not going to be the one determining whether or not that E-Verify clause is in your contract. So it's going to be that contracting official that you work with when gaining your contract. So the contracts that are affected are the prime contracts, the subcontracts that qualify, and then indefinite delivery and indefinite quantity contracts. First of all, we're going to talk about these prime contracts and how they are affected, as well as which ones are um, need to have that clause included. So a prime contract that would have the FAR clause included are ones that are above the simplified acquisition threshold. The period of performance is at least 120 days or more. Some of the contract works performed in the United States, and that it does not include or is not solely for commercially available off the shelf or COTS items or those related services. Similarly are the subcontracts. And the prime contractor is actually the legal entity bound by that FAR E-Verify clause and need to ensure the clause is included in any qualifying subcontracts. So as a prime contractor, this is where you need to be aware of what your subcontracts include, the dollar amount that they are for, so that you're ensuring you're including that clause in those subcontracts as well. And the criteria for subcontracts is that the value of the contract must be more than $3,500. The contract is for commercial or non-commercial services or construction. At least some of that contract work is going to be done in the United States, and the contract is not solely for commercially available off-the-shelf or COTS items again. And then that FAR E-Verify clause actually flows down to all tiers of subcontracts. So if your subcontractor has a subcontractor, has a subcontractor, that clause flows down to each of those subcontracts. So as the prime contractor, if that's you, you'd need to ensure that your subcontractors are also including the clause in their contracts as well, if they qualify. Finally, then we have those IDIQ or indefinite delivery, indefinite quantity contracts. And with these, if there's an existing contract that was awarded for a period of performance that extends at least 6 months past September 8th of 2009, which is the date of that FAR final rule, uh, it and there is still substantial work or a number of orders expected during the remaining period of performance, then the contract needed to be bilaterally modified to include the FAR E-Verify clause. If it's a new indefinite delivery, indefinite quantity contract, it should have the FAR E-Verify included. All right, so next we're going to talk about some of those requirements within the FAR E-Verify clause, as well as your responsibilities as a federal contractor, how to enroll or update your company profile to include the FAR E-Verify clause, and then, or excuse me, to indicate that you have that FAR E-Verify clause. Oh, excuse me, I'm not sure what that is. My computer is talking to me. Uh, and then also determining who to verify and when to verify those employees. We're also going to talk about that Form I-9 for your existing employees. So when you're creating cases for existing employees, they may have been an employee for a long time, a long period of time. So typically, when you're creating cases in E-Verify, it's for a new hire because that's for most employees. So we need to know what to do with those Form I-9s for existing employees, how to update them if you need to do a new I-9 or what the requirements are there. So we're going to get into the details of that a little bit. I am going to really give you some references though, because the details for that Form I-9 part of this are pretty specific. So I'm going to give you some references for that. We will kind of touch upon them a little bit though, so that you know the requirements that are out there. So first of all, let's get into and talk a little bit about updating your company profile or enrolling in E-Verify. So with this, once you receive that contract that contains the FAR E-Verify clause, you have 30 calendar days from the award or the modification date to enroll or update your company profile in E-Verify if you're already an E-Verify account holder. So it's 30 calendar days from your contract award date or mod date. If you're already enrolled in E-Verify, you would be updating your company profile. We want to make sure that you do not re-enroll in E-Verify, as that would create a duplicate account in E-Verify for your company. So you don't want to do that. You simply want to update your company account to reflect now that you are an E-Verify FAR contractor. So what you'll do is go to company on that top ribbon, like we've got indicated on the slide. Click on Edit Company Profile here, that first option down. And that's where you'll go to begin editing or updating your profile to now show that you're a FAR E-Verify contractor. So you'll need to change your organization designation to federal contractor with FAR E-Verify clause. And again, you'll need to do that within 30 calendar days of the award date or mod date. I know it's hard to see on the screenshot here, but that's the first option up here. There is also a federal contractor without the FAR E-Verify clause. You want to make sure you're not clicking that one, because if you start running cases for existing employees and you've got that second option clicked, it's not going to trigger for our compliance division that you're running existing employees. So you want to make sure you've got that correct designation of federal contractor with the FAR E-Verify clause. You'll also need to choose your federal contractor category. And the choices here are that none apply, meaning you're not in any of these special categories. Also, there's institutions of higher education, state or local governments, federally recognized Indian tribes, and sureties. So those are the options under those special categories. And we're going to talk a little bit later about what those special categories mean and how you can actually limit the number of cases you're running in E-Verify if you fall into one of those special categories. So if you do fall within one, it might be a benefit to you to make sure that you designate that within the system so that you can limit the cases you're running if you want. And then finally, you'll choose which employees you will verify in E-Verify. So we're going to talk about that, which ones that you'll be running in E-Verify and the options you have there. So that was for people who are already enrolled in E-Verify and you need to update your profile. This is for people who have not yet enrolled in E-Verify and you need to go ahead and complete that enrollment process. So the first thing you'll do is to visit the E-Verify homepage, which is very simple. It's everify.gov. I've also given you a live link to it on the slide here. And from there, you will click the Enroll button in that top right-hand corner. And that takes you to our enrollment page. And the enrollment page gives you a lot of information about the enrollment process. Some of the things that you need to know are on that enrollment checklist. You can also check to see if your company is maybe already enrolled. Maybe it was set up by somebody who's no longer with your organization, or someone else is running those cases and you don't even know that, kind of depending on how many hiring sites you've got. So you can always check the status of your company to see if you're already enrolled by using that first option there. The last one then is the enrollment process. That number 3 takes you through the steps of enrollment, kind of letting you know what you'll be entering, what questions you'll be answering during the enrollment process, just so you can have all the information right up front before you continue on with enrollment. When you have all the information you need and you're comfortable and ready to go ahead, you can click the Enroll Now button at the top of the page, and that's going to take you on to the enrollment of your company. So when you're enrolling, there are some decisions you need to make and some questions you need to answer about your company. So I always really encourage employers to take a look at that enrollment checklist. Make sure you have all of the information at hand when you're ready to continue on with the enrollment. That way you can knock it out quickly and get that process completed and you'll be ready to create cases. All right, so that's enrollment. It is pretty simple. Once you're enrolled, creating the cases is very easy, and we're going to see some screenshots of what that looks like a little bit later. But first of all, I want to talk more about your workforce and who to create cases for in E-Verify. So this is one of those decisions that you need to make, and you will make this designation within your company profile that we talked about a little while ago. So, with this, you need to decide if your company is going to verify only new hires company wide, as well as existing employees that are assigned to that federal contract, or your entire workforce. So, your entire workforce is going to be all new hires and all existing employees throughout the company. So, we know that might be quite a few more employees. However, it would be a lot less record keeping, obviously. So, if you've got your entire workforce run, you don't have to kind of keep track of who's working on the contract and who's not. So it kind of depends on the size of your company, how manageable these numbers are, and what's going to work best for you. But those are your two options, and you will make that designation in your company profile within E-Verify. As with all rules, we do have an exception to the rule here as far as who will not be run through E-Verify. So the first one here is for people who were hired on or before November 6th of 1986 who have not had a break in employment with you and they're continuing in employment. These folks don't need to be run through E-Verify. The reason for that is because prior to this date, that Form I-9 was not in existence. So these folks won't have a Form I-9 on file, therefore you do not need to, nor should you run an E-Verify case for them. The second bullet is for those employers who are already enrolled in E-Verify and using the system. So if you have an employee who is existing and they've already been confirmed as employment authorized with E-Verify and they're continuing in employment, you wouldn't need to run a new case for them simply because you got this federal contract with the FAR E-Verify clause. They've already been confirmed, they're employment authorized, they're good to go. You don't need to run a new case for those folks either. So next is some instances where you can kind of choose not to verify an employee. You can choose to verify them as well, but you have the choice of not verifying them. So if you've got newer existing employees who have an active, confidential, secret, or top secret security clearance or HSPD 12 compliant credentials, they are kind of an exception to the rule. You can choose to verify them through E-Verify or not. It's really up to you. And the reason for this with the first bullet is because these people have already been through a very rigorous background check. And, we're certain that they're already employment authorized. However, for your record keeping, it's kind of up to you. Maybe it's easier just to run everybody. And therefore, that's why this one's a choice for you. You can choose to run them or not. The second bullet is only applicable if you chose to run new hires and existing employees who are working on that federal contract. If you chose to run your entire workforce, this second bullet does not apply to you. Okay, so it's just for those people who are running new hires and existing employees working on the contract. And this one says that you can choose to create cases in E-Verify for existing employees who perform support work. So that might be administrative work, overhead work, or indirect work on that federal contract. So, kind of a choice for you, again, sort of depending on the number of employees you have, just so you've got some options here to make sure it's going to work best for you. But again, the second one only applies if you're going to run cases for those existing employees who are working on the federal contract. Okay, going back to those special category employers that you'll designate within your E-Verify profile. Again, those are institutions of higher learning, state and local governments, federally recognized Indian tribes, and sureties. So if you fall within one of these special categories, you can actually limit your E-Verify cases because you fall into one of these special categories. So this option allows that special category employer to limit E-Verify cases to those new employees assigned to the federal contract and those existing employees assigned to the federal contract. So I know that probably sounds kind of similar to what we already talked about, where you run cases for your new hires as well as employees assigned to the federal contract. But the difference here is that if you fall into a special category, you're allowed to limit those new hire cases. If you don't fall in a special category, it's all new hires. You're creating cases for all new hires, whether they're working on that federal contract or not. These special category employers can limit the cases to new hires who are working on the federal contract. So it may allow you to create fewer cases than if you didn't fall within one of these special categories. But again, you do need to make that designation in your E-Verify profile. Next, we're going to talk about when to verify those new hires as well as your existing employees. So first of all, we're going to start with new hires. So if you were not previously enrolled in E-Verify and you're doing so now because you have this federal contract, you have an additional 90 calendar days to begin creating cases for those new hires. So we've got that 30 days up front here to enroll um, within E-Verify, and then you've got 90 days to begin creating cases for your new hires. Once you begin creating cases for your new hires, at that point in time, then you must abide by the 3 business day rule for any new hires. And that 3 business day rule applies to all E-Verify employers. And it states that once you've hired someone, let's say they start working for pay on Monday, you as the employer then have a 3-day window. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, if those are your business days, to get that case created in E-Verify. So that's what that 3-day window is. So you've got 90 days to start creating those cases, but once you start creating them for new hires, you'll need to start using that 3 business day rule to get any additional cases created. Also, if you're already enrolled in E-Verify and you're using E-Verify to verify your new hires according to that 3-day rule, you should just continue to do so. You should not change that practice just because you've now received a federal contract with the FAR E-Verify clause. So it's just kind of business as usual if you're already enrolled in using E-Verify by that 3-day window. Next, let's talk about existing employees assigned to that federal contract. So, kind of think back, we had those 2 options: employees that are existing assigned to the federal contract, or your entire workforce of existing employees. So, here we're talking about those existing employees who are assigned to the federal contract if this is the option you chose. So for these, you must enter all of that Form I-9 information into E-Verify within 90 calendar days from enrolling or updating your company profile to now show that you're a federal contractor with the FAR E-Verify clause. So it's that same time frame that you have for new employees. The difference here is that you'll need to create all of those cases within the 90-day window for those existing employees who are assigned to the federal contract. Additionally, with these, if you are assigning an existing employee to a federal contract anytime after day 60 of this initial 90 calendar day period, you've got an additional 30 days from that assignment date to get that person run in E-Verify. So I know that can be a little confusing, but we just want to make sure that you've got plenty of time to get everyone run through E-Verify. So for instance, maybe you add someone or assign someone to that contract on day 89 of your 90 calendar day window. We're giving you an additional 30 days from that assignment date. That way you've got plenty of time to get their case run within the E-Verify system. Next, we've got your entire workforce. So if you chose to create cases for all new hires plus all existing employees company-wide, this is going to be your time frame. So with this, you have twice as much time because clearly this could be substantially more people than if you chose to only create cases for those employees assigned to the federal contract. So with these, you need to enter that Form I-9 information for those existing employees into E-Verify within 180 calendar days from your enrollment or update date within E-Verify. So it's giving you more time, just again, making sure you've got plenty of time to get those cases created. Next are those Form I-9 requirements. And again, I'm not getting into a lot of detail about these, but we do want to make sure that everyone is using the Form I-9 because it's required by law. So if you hire employees, be sure you're completing the Form I-9 with that employee and keeping it on file for the duration of their employment with you. There is also a short retention period that you are required to keep the Form I-9 once that person has left your company. So if you're not familiar with the Form I-9, please reach out to me following the webinar. I'd be happy to give you more information about that or additional training if your company needs it. We do want to make sure that you are certainly completing and retaining the Form I-9 and that you're using the most current version of that I-9. Right now, the most current version is the one dated October 21st of 2019. You need to be sure that you're using that version of the Form I-9 for all new hires as well as re-verifications. So a re-verification is done if someone had temporary work authorization. Maybe they gave you their work authorization document, their employment authorization document, that is showing temporary proof of employment authorization. That employment authorization might expire, and that's when re-verification comes into play. So you want to make sure that you're using that new form for new hires and re-verifications. And if you've got remote workers, you can always delegate the authority to complete that Form I-9 to a responsible agent. The reason you may need to do this at sometimes is because if you have a remote worker, you may not be able to be physically present with them to review their documents. And that is a requirement of the Form I-9. So whoever is reviewing those documents in the presence of the employee, for instance, like I said, their employment authorization document or their US passport is another option. Maybe they gave you a driver's license and a social security card. Those documents need to be reviewed in the presence of the employee. So if you're not able to do that, you can have someone who is physically present with them to do that, and they act on your behalf. They then also complete section 2 of the Form I-9 and sign it on behalf of your company. If that's the case, just make sure that person knows what they're doing, of course, because as a company, you still retain any liability for errors that that third party makes on the form. Again, we've given you some live links here to the Form I-9 on the USCIS website as well as I-9 Central. We also currently have numerous temporary policies related to COVID-19. Some of these relate to reviewing that employee's documents. Maybe you are operating remotely right now, and so you're not physically present with them to review the documents. We do have some temporary policies related to that. We also have temporary policies related to the documents. Some documents are being delayed. The production of them is being delayed due to COVID-19. Others, employees are not able to renew because those public offices are closed. So we know that's causing some problems for employees and employers. Because of that, we've given authorization for several temporary policies, and you can find those on our temporary policies page. I've given you the live link to that down here. I've also got a slide regarding this a little bit later in the presentation where it talks about all the temporary policies related to COVID-19. A couple reminders here or things that you need to be mindful of with that Form I-9 once you've enrolled into E-Verify. These are a little nuanced from using the Form I-9 generally, just using the Form I-9 alone. Once you've enrolled into E-Verify, there are a few things that you need to be mindful of and aware of when using that Form I-9. The first one is that the employee is required to provide their social security number. Once you've enrolled to begin using E-Verify, they need to give you their social number on section 1 of the Form I-9. Additionally, if they choose to give you a List B identity document for Form I-9, it must be one that contains a photograph. You'll still need to complete and retain that Form I-9 and do so, complete Section 2 no later than 3 days following the employee's first day of work for pay. That 3-day time frame or 3-day window is the same for creating your E-Verify case, so that's pretty easy to remember for Section 2 and E-Verify. Additionally, if that employee gave you an email address in section 1 of their Form I-9, you must enter it when creating the E-Verify case. And I'll show you where that entry is made in a couple more slides. We also have a photo match tool within E-Verify, and this is a pretty cool feature within the system that allows you to compare the employee's document photo to a photo on file at the Department of Homeland Security. So it kind of lets you know if this is a fraudulent document or if the document has maybe been tampered with. And so with that photo match feature, you are required to make photocopies of certain documents if the employee chooses to present those. And then finally, just a reminder, Section 3 of the Form I-9 is where you will complete that re-verification that I mentioned. You will not create a new case in E-Verify for Section 3. That re-verification is just done on the Form I-9, not E-Verify for existing employees. So some need to know points about E-Verify and the Form I-9 once you've enrolled into E-Verify. It's pretty much the same, but again, just some slight nuances that you want to make sure you're aware of. All right, so let's talk now about a decision you'll need to make about those Form I-9s for your existing employees. As we talked about before, you have that decision to make about which existing employees you're going to run, and that one's designated in the E-Verify system. This one is a choice that you will designate within your company. However, you will not indicate this decision in E-Verify. However, you do need to make sure you're being consistent and using either option 1 for all existing employees or option 2 for all existing employees. Again, it's up to you, option 1 or option 2. Just be sure once you've chosen that that is the one you're using for all of those existing employees that will be run through E-Verify. So option 1 is to complete new Form I-9s for all employees who will be run through E-Verify. This one could be a little simpler, maybe. You don't have to keep track of so much. It's just going to be a blanket policy. You'll create new Form I-9s or have those employees complete new Form I-9s for all of them, everyone that'll be run through E-Verify. Now, if you choose option 1, you still want to retain their previously completed Form I-9 and attach the new to the old. Option 2 allows you to complete new Form I-9s when required and update existing Form I-9s when allowed. So you can imagine that with option 2, there are a few more points to know about, things that you might need to be aware of when deciding if the person needs a new I-9 or if you can just update their existing. And that is what we're going to go into next. I'm going to warn you, the next few slides are very wordy. And because there's so much information on them, I'm not going to read these to you verbatim. You can, however, find all of them in our supplemental guide for federal contractors in section 2.2.1. And I will give you a link to that in a couple more slides. I have them all on slides because I know sometimes people forget where to go back to in that supplemental guide, or they're not sure where to find it in the future. So I like to have them on the slides because I know that you're able to download these here and now today, so you have this at hand if you need it. So the first slide here and the next one are when to complete a new Form I-9 for those existing employees. So that's that one as well as this one. The next two slides are for when to update an existing Form I-9. So again, there's a lot of points here. Of course, this is all for option 2. If you chose option 1, you're just going to be doing new Form I-9s for everyone. But if you choose option 2, you need to be mindful of these points. Make sure you're updating the Form I-9 or creating a new one when necessary. I've given you the live link on this last slide regarding those options to that section 2.2 that talks about each of these bullets, and you can always go back to that if you need more information or if you need to review these again. Okay, in our next section, we're going to talk about creating those E-Verify cases. Again, this is very simple. It's a simple process. Once you've enrolled into E-Verify, the system really walks you through it. It steps you through what you need to do, what you need to know, what information you'll be entering. But just so you can become a little more familiar with it, I'm just going to show you some screenshots of what it looks like. Again, this is that basic verification process. You're taking the Form I-9 information, entering it into E-Verify, and then you'll get those case results. The employment authorized case results close automatically in the system. So again, very simple result. It closes automatically, so there's not a lot of processing or work that you need to do. The tentative non-confirmations do require a little more work. Most of that work is required on the part of the employee, but you do need to notify them of the tentative non-confirmation result. And I'll show you how to do that here in a few more slides. Okay, so this is our first screenshot of what this looks like in E-Verify. This is the first case processing screen. You're basically entering that employee's basic biographic information, including their date of birth. The screen before this is their name. This is where you'll be entering that email address that we talked about. If the employee did not provide an email address, you just click no email address provided. No big deal. That allows you then to move on. You'll also indicate which citizenship or immigration status the employee indicated that they fall within. This comes from section 1 of their Form I-9. And then you'll indicate which documents they provided. They can provide a List A document, which proves their identity and their employment authorization, or they can provide a combination of B and C documents. And these are all in a list of acceptable documents that goes right along with that Form I-9. And then you'll use the drop down below to indicate specifically which document or documents the employee provided. You'll then be asked to enter the document numbers. If you're not sure where to find that document number, we have recently added a helper text to the system. It looks like the screenshot over here on the right. And with this, we have various different versions of documents. So if the document you're looking at does not look like the one above, you can click on the document below. We've got these different options. We know a lot of these documents are There's various versions out of them out there. In fact, the Social Security card has 50 different versions out there. So we want to make sure that you're getting the best information for the case that you're running. So you can click on the different versions and it will display in a larger format above there. And then you'll enter those additional case details, including what day that employee began working for pay. And of course, if you're running existing employees, you'll use this manual field and you will go ahead and enter the first day of work for pay from their Form I-9. So it's going to be an existing employee. Their first day of work for pay was probably a long time ago or could potentially be a while ago. That's fine within the system. Once you've designated yourself as a federal contractor with the FAR E-Verify clause, the system will recognize that and realize that this, although it's not within that 3-day window requirement, it is an existing employee that you're running due to a federal contract. And then a little more information here about photo match. This is what it looks like in this system, although the person's actual photo will be displayed here. And what you'll do with this is you'll match the photo that displays in E-Verify with the photo on the employee's document. These two photos should be identical because they are the ones on file with the Department of Homeland Security. And photo match is triggered if an employee chooses to present you a U.S. passport or passport card, a permanent resident card, or an employment authorization document. These are all List A documents. You can't require an employee to show you one of those documents, but if they do give you one, you need to make a photocopy of it and retain it with the employee's Form I-9, and then you'll be brought to this photo match screen within the system. All right, switching gears here a little bit to that tentative non-confirmation result. Again, this result is received pretty infrequently. It's less than 2% of all cases. However, it is important to know what to do when your employee receives a tentative non-confirmation. And there can be 3 different types of TNCs: Social Security Administration TNC, a Department of Homeland Security TNC, or a dual TNC, meaning they got both a DHS and SSA TNC. What you need to do when you receive this result from the system is notify that employee. You need to complete this referral process in the system within 10 federal government workdays. So let's say they get that TNC, you see it in the E-Verify system. You then print out what's called the further action notice, which is completely pre-populated. It gives that employee their information and their options to take action or not, and that is the employee's choice. You will then indicate that decision in E-Verify and do so within 10 federal government workdays, and that then refers the case. It's just the click of a button for you. Once the case is referred, you can print the referral date confirmation, which has the date that the case was referred, and it gives the employee additional steps that they need to take to resolve that case. So it's a pretty simple and straightforward process in the system. We have it all bulleted out in there. As long as you read the bullets and print those documents, it's very simple. That employee then, under normal circumstances, has 8 federal government workdays from the referral date to either visit or call the appropriate agency. Now, due to COVID-19, some of these TNCs will be extended due to public office closures. So, namely an SSA TNC. So the clock is kind of stopped for those if the employee gets an SSA TNC, but they still need to decide if they're going to take action on the case, which means you would refer it, or not take action, meaning you can terminate that employee at that time. So any employee who is not taking action can be terminated, and then you would close the case in E-Verify, and you're protected in doing so by the memorandum of understanding that you signed when you began using E-Verify. And when those employees are taking action on their tentative non-confirmations, we've made it very easy for you to find the case updates in the system. We have these case alerts at the bottom of the screen here. The one in the middle is cases with new updates. So that's a direct link to any of those pending cases that now have an updated status in the system. As far as compliance, I just want to let everyone know that once you're enrolled into E-Verify, you do need to post these 2 posters. in a prominent location where potential employees will learn about your job announcements. You can print the posters from your home screen under resources. So if you go to that top ribbon, there's home, cases, profile, company, etc. The last one is resources. Under resources is an essential resources tab, and that's where you can go to print these two posters. And these posters let people know that you're enrolled in E-Verify, and if they're hired with you, their information will be run through the system. In our wrap up, we have our COVID-19 temporary policies page, our immigrant and employee rights resources, as well as our Form I-9 and E-Verify resources. So again, another wordy, lots of information slide, but we want to make sure you have all of this information at hand if you need to refer back to it. So the physical Form I-9 document review, we've got that one. This has actually now been extended through December. So I will send you an updated link to that. It was just recently updated a couple days ago. The renewal of those List B identity documents, we've got some temporary policies related to that. Certain non-E-Verify ag employers of H-2A workers, there's temporary policy related to that. Those EAD or employment authorization document delays due to COVID-19, employees can now provide Form I-797 notice of action as a List C7 document. So lots and lots of temporary policies due to COVID-19. You can find all of these on our COVID-19 temporary policies page on our website. We've got a good Q&A section for that. And then, of course, I've given you live links throughout this slide as well. The Immigrant and Employee Rights section at the Department of Justice is really the employees' advocates, but they also have good resources for employers as well. So there can be complaints of discrimination to the Department of Justice. In order to make sure that you are within your rights as an employer, I'd certainly encourage you to visit this list of employer do's and don'ts. It kind of lets you know things you can do and cannot do during employment verification. They also offer public webinars monthly, and they have this employer hotline where you can contact them and ask questions. Similarly, we have various resources here at E-Verify for both Form I-9, E-Verify, our hotline numbers. So we have lots of ways for you to reach out to us if you have questions about anything that we talked about today. We've also got that supplemental guide for federal contractors, which is specific to your situation. I've given you a live link for that here. We also have a federal contractor portion of our website. So lots of ways to find that information that you might need. You can also reach out to me directly. If you have questions or comments about today's training or need more information, my email address is shown here, as is my phone number. So certainly reach out to me. I'm always happy to help if I'm able, and if I'm not, I can always reach out to our policy division to get more information.